Okay, Omega released their new Aquaterra World Time, and it's kind of weird. 43 millimeters, 50 millimeters lug to lug, 14 millimeters thick, grade 2 titanium at $11,000, not grade 5 like my watch, which is much worse. And they use grade 5 on the inside, and no one's talking about Omega anymore.
Wow.
Yes, so that is the subject of today. We're also going to dive into why Omega is kind of falling off the map in a very weird way.
Like intentionally. Omega seems to intentionally be making us forget about them.
Yeah.
Why am I forgetting about Omega?
And why do we make this video 3 times?
This is the 3rd time I'm making this video.
Yes.
What is up, Watch Fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Watch Shop.
My name is Michael, and this video is sponsored by the Theo and Harris Watch Shop and Patreon. But more on that later.
More on that later. So, okay, what's going on with Omega? Because it's not a brand that's been talked about a lot lately. Omega has kind of fallen off the map, like you said.
Yes.
What's going on?
Women.
You know what? More problems, right?
You know what they say. More on that in a little bit, but really we're talking about Omega made this kind of monumental turn of their ship. We're theorizing with their releases because we've made this video quite a few times because we keep coming back to it and thinking like, no, that can't be right. There has to be something different.
Yes.
And last video I said, like, I think Omega's doing a staggered release, and you're like, no, that doesn't work. That will never work. And then they just, again, randomly released watches.
Yes.
Before we jump into that, I'll give you the full rundown of their new release, which is weird and has weird feedback already. But then I want to jump into that idea of why are you doing something that doesn't work? Why is no one really talking about you? I couldn't find a single video on the new release because I wanted to listen to the stats as I drove here. No one posted about it 2 days ago. You search Omega new releases.
Shocking.
You search Omega new releases, Hodinkee article does not come up.
Shocking.
That's weird. This is Omega.
Wow.
You've seen the new watches, correct?
Yes.
I think they look cool, I will say.
Yeah.
That being said, Omega has an issue, or I don't want to say an issue because a lot of people are much bigger than me, but they make very thick watches.
They do.
Like the Omega Ed White, which is probably my favorite chronograph, or one of my favorite chronographs, is 14 millimeters thick.
Yes.
That is crazy, especially when you're boasting just being one of the best movement makers there is. You did METAS certified movements before anybody else. So now we have this. This is the Seamaster Aquaterra World Timer line. This is an update. These are new watches. These have existed before. And from what I've read, they're not the most popular watch. If you go to a boutique, they're usually going to be there. You don't have to be on a list or anything like that. These releases, like I said, 43 millimeters, 50 millimeters lug to lug. So these are tanks. The Speedmaster is a big watch. Really, to most people, honestly, 42 millimeters is on the larger side. And this is even bigger from lug to lug, especially, which is what most people kind of say, like, okay, this is too big. Like you could wear a 45 millimeter watch if it's a 43 lug to lug.
Right.
It'll wear better.
Like this a Panerai radio mirror is a good example of a watch that at 45 actually wears pretty well.
It's going to cover a lot of your wrist, but it's not going to dwarf your wrist and be hanging over the sides. This comes close to a lot of people. Panerai, maybe 6.5 inch wrist could wear it. This is like 6.75, maybe even a little bigger.
Even that's pushing. I mean, I'm 6.75, and that would be tough.
You're 6.75?
Yeah.
Really?
What are you?
6.
We are talking about our wrists, right?
Yeah, so this watch got released. It's a tank. And the weirdest thing is it's $10,500 or $10,200 for not on steel or not on a steel bracelet. $10,400 on a steel bracelet. And then $11,000 for titanium, which is fine. But at $11,000,
there are better watches.
There are better watches, but even more importantly, you use Titanium 5 at that price. Titanium 2 is much softer, scratches
I was going to
easily.
say, can you explain this to me? Because I'm not a buyer of titanium watches, so to explain this to me.
Titanium 2 is softer, scratches easier, and it's just generally, that's where you get the lower titanium watches.
And that's what they were using?
Yeah. But oddly, the inside, this world that is lasered, is Titanium 5. It's the harder, better titanium that the entire watch should be made out of.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Let me unpack some of what's going on here.
Yeah.
I think that the Aquaterra World Time is one of the greatest Omegas. I do think it's too big.
Yes.
But I know that does suit a lot of people.
Yep.
Okay. But I think that is one of the most interesting watches. I think it's a really good execution of a world time. It's fascinating. It's beautiful. I think it's a great complication, but there aren't really many of them, right? At all.
Sure.
I could very easily see, obviously, the Aquaterra world time being put up against a GMT from Rolex,
Yep.
and there being a logical argument to get the Omega, right?
Of
I
course,
can totally
of course.
see that. That being said, I actually am not crazy about these new releases. I was glad to see Omega invest more in this model that I think is one of their stronger models.
Sure.
But I'm actually just not a fan of the design all that much. I mean, kind of like flat. That's very personal opinion, obviously.
Sure.
My favorite is on the bracelet.
Yep.
It's just all very busy. There's a lot going on here, and I think it's a little bit distracting.
I would say my only issue with Omega, the Speedmaster and this watch, I think the Speedmaster, if it was smaller, and I say this all the time, would be the only watch I've ever worn. If that was a 40 and a little thinner, only watch I've ever worn.
Right.
This wouldn't be the only watch I'd ever wear, but if this was a smaller case and slimmer, to me personally, this case would knock it out of the park. I would love this watch.
Right.
And I would pay, I think I'm overpaying, but I would pay $10,000, $10,500
For that watch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
no,
I wouldn't get titanium though, because it would really upset me that I paid $11,000 for a grade 2.
But I got to say, that seems, I mean, I have plenty of criticisms about Omega, and we'll talk about that in a second. But like, it seems very inconsistent with their behavior. To produce a watch with what you're saying is a subpar material, like if it wasn't you saying it, I probably wouldn't actually believe it. Like, I know that you're correct, but that is unusual. Omega spends a lot of time and money on research and development, and really holds their watches to quite a high standard, right? Their meta certification is fast. See, that I think that is just a more beautiful watch.
Yeah.
I love the green. I do love
steel.
green, but this is a great watch, and I prefer it on a bracelet. But that is a beautiful watch, man.
Yeah.
And what's amazing about what Omega does, that a lot of other brands don't do, is this perfectly laser etched detailing. They do it on some of their moon phases. They're doing it here on the world time. Omega's dials are really well detailed, and they are often quite beautiful. I don't love the huge Seamaster engraving. It reminds me of, like, I don't know, it just feels like over-branded to me.
Oh, right there?
Below Omega. Yeah, that just seems like a tattoo on the chest of an, MS-13 member or something, But, but that being said, I like the idea. I don't love the execution, and I hate the material they used.
And I will say COA, just in case, there may be some brilliant engineering tactic to use grade 2.
Right.
But it's generally thought of as like, even if there is a brilliant engineering tactic, it's like me saying to you, well, like, I'm going to give you a steel watch, even though this should be made out of gold, because steel's harder.
Right.
And you're like, right, but that doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, which is a whole other subject, and we can talk about this for an hour. But it's funny when you look at vintage watches, how some of the steel watches, like even dress watches, steel is more desirable than gold. And I'm like, guys, I feel like people that are following that, I think you guys are being tricked. Gold is better, right? Like, it's shinier, it's cooler, it has intrinsic value.
You're at an auction, there's a one of one, like Rolex being auctioned, it's steel, you're like,
ooh, $2 million. I'm like,
you palm them in Daytona, you're like, do they know that's
on a steel watch? Well, one of my favorite, like, it's, kind of like back and forths is when people ask me, well, what the gold weight is on a watch, right? Because they're trying to determine the value of the gold in the watch. And I'm like, cool, what's the steel weight value of your sub?
Right. There could be, like I said, some clever reason they're using grade 2, but from what I've read, just using grade 5, they'd have to price this watch even higher.
And now what watches, so maybe it's, okay, interesting. So maybe it would have become prohibitive value-wise.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is wild, because you'd look at these watches and you're like, you'd make that even more? Like, the material would that have that much of a premium on these watches?
I don't know. Well, it's also fascinating. It's like, is it harder to work with the more expensive material? Because, like platinum, for instance, I believe gold is actually more expensive than platinum, but platinum is harder to machine, which is why the Rolex platinum watches are more valuable. All platinum watches are more valuable.
Platinum, I've said this to you before also, and then we'll get into the next topic, is cool because if you polish it, it doesn't flake off or fly off the watch, it moves.
Interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, platinum's funny because it's also, we'll talk more about it at a separate.
Yeah, we'll do a platinum video.
We'll do a platinum video. But this does bring up a larger conversation, which is why are people, and we are included in this group, talking about Omega less and less? Omega has made so much progress in the last 10 years. They're a new company. They're huge.
Yep.
And yet no one's talking about them.
And they're not even doing like a theatrical release anymore.
It's weird. But before we get into that, what are you wearing on your wrist?
I am wearing a Datejust 1601 and 18 karat solid gold with my favorite type of dial, a flat white dial.
So cool.
Incredible watch.
Yeah. A lot of, obviously, people associate the gold oyster with the day date, right? It's always day date. But really, the solid gold Datejusts are so rich and interesting. The really, if you go back a little bit, the first people to really like get behind them were actually Italian collectors, and Italian collectors set the trends a lot of the time.
Really?
They were like, well, actually, the Datejusts are actually even rarer than the day dates because Rolex made so many day dates.
Right.
So they're rarer watches. My dad has one. So I really stand behind the gold Datejust.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that watch.
I mean, it's like the everyman's watch.
It's the watch of the everyman, I'm also wearing an everyman's watch.
You're wearing my favorite version of the Royal Oak.
Yep. Royal Oak by Audemars Piguet. Military dial. Super cool. Both of these watches are available in the Theo and Harris watch shop. We're doing a full website redesign right now. It's really exciting. Yeah.
Yes.
And I personally source all of these watches, source them from all over the world, from Oklahoma to Tokyo. And that is not just, a turn of speech, right? I really do. It's super cool.
Yeah.
A lot of these watches, sometimes they come from the original owner. A lot of the time they come from collectors, and I really love doing it. And we are a family business, as everyone knows.
Yeah.
So go ahead on over to the Theo and Harris watch shop and take a look and explore straps as well.
Yeah, check out the straps and
rolls. That's my spiel about retail.
That's a good spiel.
Yeah. Okay, so back into it. Laying some foundation for why Omega is behaving so, unusually.
Yes. And the answer is, we think women, just to give you
it's real. Like we didn't actually rehearse that. Michael said it, and I was like, oh, you're right. It is women.
Yeah.
Forever, watch brands, this goes back to the 1930s. I mean, maybe even before then, right? Watch brands release their year's collection at a time with pomp and circumstance.
Why?
Right? Because everyone's attention is there. It is just industry normal for every brand, every major brand to say on basically the same day, this is our collection, right? And the world is watching. The world is watching and comparing, and they're excited, they're engaged. Watches are talked about all over the world on those, not just day, but from that day for weeks.
Yes.
Hundreds of millions of dollars are spent.
And this is because this is not the chance. It's obviously a chance for a brand to say these are new watches, but it's the chance for the brand to make you fall in love with the brand through their theatrics.
100%.
Rolex has videos of people speeding down racetracks with the Daytona. They're flipping watches around. They're showing all the new stuff. So you're getting sold on the brand consistently.
100%.
And a while ago, I said to you, well, maybe they're switching strategies and they're going to release a watch every now and again, which they did, but what do you lose when you do that?
Well, backing up just a little bit,
yeah.
I have no problem with the fact that Omega does not release on the same day as a lot of other brands, right? Omega is owned by the Swatch Group, so the Swatch Group does their own thing. No problem with that.
Sure.
Still, with pomp and circumstance, you can release watches and it can be great. Last year, I was at Omega's launch in Miami, Omega Days. Phenomenal time. Yeah. Everyone was talking about Omega. The f***ing world was talking about Omega.
Yeah.
Not forever, but for one day, and then a couple of days following.
Sure.
Money is spent. People are excited. There's energy. There's energy behind the brand. And so much in luxury watches is energy.
Yes.
So many decisions are made because of just excitement and passion and kind of like irrational behavior.
I better run to the store now.
I will do anything. How do I text my AD? I'm texting a strange man.
I'm hearing rumors that I can't get this watch. I better run down right now and go get that watch.
Exactly. So I had no problem with the fact that Omega doesn't release with Rolex, with Patek, and all those other guys. That's fine. But now they're just not releasing on a day. They're just trickling watches out. And I mean, no one's paying attention because you've totally deflated everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to be a big deal at all.
I saw a few Instagram posts. Like I said, it was tough finding information. It's not tough, but it was not the forefront of YouTube, which I kind of expected. Not the forefront of Hodinkee, which I kind of expected. And it's like, this is Omega.
And the reason why it's women is why?
women are a massive market.
Women are a massive
You cannot stop women.
Right.
So before we get into that, really quick, we have a Patreon.
Yes, we do. We have 139,000 subscribers on YouTube. We love YouTube. We love being here. But because there are so many of you, and we couldn't possibly engage with every single person, we decided to create an extra small group, a little, Theo and Harris family on Patreon. So we're doing podcasts weekly. We're doing live chats online. We're doing Q&As. We're doing meetups in Manhattan. And frankly, I think we're going to do some meetups elsewhere as well. We're building a beautiful watch community, and we're creating a ton of content, and it's all on Patreon. It is not free, but it is absolutely worth it. We've got a really great family over there already, and we only started a couple weeks ago.
And we're going live.
And we're going live. You and I are going live next Thursday.
Yeah.
So I'm going to light up a cigar, pour a little scotch maybe, and answer watch questions, and you and I will chat about, who knows what. But looking forward to it. So I hope to see you all over on Patreon, and once you are, shoot me a DM. I am constantly engaging with our fans over there. We're even doing Zooms and like video chats.
Really?
Yeah. I started doing that too.
That's cool.
I'm just excited about it. So I'm trying to give as much value as possible. It's been a blast.
Yeah.
So it's kind of wild. But
Check
anyway,
it out.
looking forward to seeing you guys over there. Back to Omega.
Yes. The number one watch in the world that's always selling is not the Datejust. Well, it is, but it's not this Daytona. It's not XYZ. It is the women's Datejust.
The lady Datejust.
So the theory is that Omega said, listen, if you go on Omega's website, the first thing that you see is Zoe Kravitz. And before that, it was another woman celebrity. I forget who it was. But that's the first thing you see. Mm-hmm. The Omega website does not look like AP. It doesn't look like Rolex. It's not showing you these rolling, beautiful watches. It's showing you celebrities. So the question is, why? And the answer is because it's sells like crazy.
It sells like crazy. So Omega is behaving very differently than the other watch brands. There's almost no similarity.
Differently than Omega.
Differently than Omega historically, right?
Yeah.
Omega seems to just be celebrity, Bond, celebrity, androgynous celebrity, James Bond, androgynous celebrity.
There were 5 slides on the Omega website on the homepage. None of them the Speedmaster.
Not one was the Speedmaster.
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Bizarre. So the question is, if Omega is behaving so differently than everybody else, that means one of two things. Either Omega understands something that no one else understands, right? Because, listen, Rolex is selling a ton of ladies' watches, right? So either Omega understands something that no one else understands, that women are going to be more receptive to this sort of marketing approach, to I think, less classy, more kiddish, more mallish feeling.
Yeah, more Tag Heuer.
More Tag Heuer,
exactly.
Modern Tag Heuer. So either they understand that, or Omega's dead wrong and they're actually marketing this incorrectly.
Right.
And frankly, I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah. Well, the interesting part that we said is that essentially, say the Rolex women's Datejust market is, I'll just say 100%. That's massive, right? 100% of women's sales, whatever. If Omega can scrape 5% on the outside to all of us who are not seeing numbers, we may be like, oh, come on, your marketing is weird. This doesn't make sense, XYZ. To them, that could be a record-setting profit.
Yes.
Because that market is massive. If you're here and you buy XYZ, you probably want to watch. Get an Omega.
I agree. I think it's fascinating. I guess I'm sure Omega's selling ladies' watches. I'm sure that's a great business for them. Fine.
Sure.
But I just don't see Omega. And frankly, I think that they do produce some great ladies' watches, right? There are some great ones. It's just culturally, I don't know. I think the ladies' watch world is basically divided between the Rolex Datejust and then the Cartier Panthère or another Cartier.
Well, Rolex Datejust, Cartier Panthère, below. I don't know if I feel like for the men's market, there's like ladders.
Yeah.
I started with Seiko, then I went to Hamilton, then I went to Longines, then I went to this. It seems like the women's market is a bit more Rolex, Cartier, something way lower because watches don't matter to me.
Like Michelle watches, and that was the brilliance of Michelle watches. Michelle watches for about $1,000, maybe $2,000. They sold you this idea of a very luxury watch, blingy. There are diamonds. They're not worth anything. They're chips, right? But they sold this idea of jewelry to a whole generation of women.
Right.
And for some reason they've since petered out. But they understood. So obviously women and men are different, right? What compels us to buy are different things.
Yeah, right.
But it's interesting. I don't know. Maybe I'm being optimistic about what moves women to buy. Maybe I'm giving women too much credit.
That's not going to be used against you.
No, but it's like, wow, Zoe Kravitz's face or some celebrity's face just sells you.
That's
like,
the weirdest.
It's kind of reductive. I feel like I'm talking down to women. It's
Zoe Kravitz, then Eddie Redmayne, then George Clooney, and it's like, are you just trying to show me that you can get these celebrities? Because that's not, at least from the watch nerdiest perspective, and most people I know, they're not saying, oh, did you see the watch Eddie Redmayne had on?
Right.
I want that watch.
Totally.
It's very odd. And we'll wrap it up with what I said to you before. Like, the weirdest part is my girlfriend Taylor is the definition of an Omega family.
Right.
Taylor's grandmother has an Omega.
Right.
Taylor's mom has an Omega. Taylor's sister has an Omega. She just got it for graduation. So Taylor's really excited to get an Omega. And I think if Taylor went on Omega's website, it would feel not as special, a little cheesy, a little, I guess the word reductive maybe, of like, this looks like a mall brand.
I think you're right. I think that Taylor represents a large, I mean, I would say the majority of women, of people. At least that's how I feel. And again, Omega's the only one behaving this way. So either Omega's right and everyone else is wrong, right? Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying they're not having success. I'm sure they are, but also at what cost? I mean, so now you're chasing this kind of like, this pop, marketing campaign, and now you just don't release watches in the same day anymore. You don't actually generate pomp and circumstance around your releases. No one in the watch industry gives a shit that you release watches this year. That's kind of weird.
Isn't that scary?
It's kind of weird.
I'd be terrified.
Can't you be on TikTok and be chasing the millennials and also still remain like a legitimately respected, like historical watch brand?
The first brand to do that would go crazy.
Totally.
Because Rolex is Rolex. Rolex is here. Everybody else is here on the graph. But if you have another brand that is all being trendy, but when you get to their website, they're very serious.
Totally.
That's cool.
Totally. I think that and this is it, and I'll stop talking after this, but I think it's about speaking in the language of the medium, right?
Right.
I don't think that they're doing that right. A website needs to be more professional. I think a website needs to be more, more aspirational, more classic, classy, rich. Right? They could do it in their own color palette, obviously, in their own branding, of course, but I think it should be more classic, right?
Yep.
You want to act kiddish on TikTok, you want to act kiddish on Instagram, because the people that are clicking on Zoe Kravitz's Instagram, right? They are choosing to be there and inherently are more likely to be swayed by Zoe Kravitz.
Right.
Whereas the people going on Omega's website, it's a different funnel. Those people are like, who are these weirdo celebrities?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Is this?
If I'm paying $10,200 for a watch, how much of that went to Eddie Redmayne?
Completely.
That's a weird thought.
Completely.
I think that's a good way of summarizing it, though. They don't seem to be acting through the correct mediums. They have some stuff that they nailed, but Eddie Redmayne or Zoe Kravitz, whoever, would make more sense on social media. And rolling, sweeping videos of the watches because someone made it to the site.
Totally.
Should be the end goal there.
And I said I was going to stop talking, but I'm clearly not. But two more things. One, Omega has done a remarkable job in the last decade. I know I said that already, but Omega has literally turned their brand around, made remarkable watches that I mean, really have blown everyone away. People never expected Omega to be today what it is. They've done an amazing job. And number two, they've made a fortune. I know Omega, we look funny because we're criticizing them.
Of course.
Because they are uber rich. They have made so much money in the last 10 years. It's silly.
They're ripping,
They're ripping. So it's working. So things are working. Like they're clearly doing it right. Their shareholders are happy.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean you're doing everything right.
Exactly.
Right? Doesn't mean you're doing everything right. And I think that's where they are right now. They're doing plenty right, but not everything. And I wonder if they'll correct that, if they'll right that wrong.
Yeah. Or if they lean into the full like LVMH tagline of like, this stuff just rips in the mall. Why not just mall it?
Why not just mall it? There's so much money there.
Yeah.
Anyway. Thank you very much for bringing this topic to my attention. Everybody, thank you for watching. Go ahead and take a look at the Theo and Harris Watch Shop and join us over on Patreon for a ton more content to listen to in your commute and everything. So that's it.